Hello, friends, and welcome to me telling you about the Tales of Exandria, the Bright Queen. I've been super into comics recently, and this is new for me. For years, I said I could never read comics. They're not in black and white. They're in color. You read them from left to right. I've just been so used to manga. I was like, I'm never going to be able to read comics. And for anyone not in the know, in my immediate circle of friends, I got into reading Batman fan fiction maybe half a year ago. And I was like, damn, wow, I got some issues, man. And I was interested in the canon characterization. So I started, looking at some meta posts on Tumblr. And then I started, the wiki is actually not that helpful. So I went from there, and so it was fan fiction, and then it was YouTube videos, then YouTube summary videos, then fan fiction, then meta post on Tumblr, and I was like, hey, maybe I'll give comics a shot. And the webtoons, Bat Family Adventures, and by Tim Drake in Urban Legends, I was like, maybe there is something for me in comics. So that's what started this whole chain reaction. So after reading some of the webtoon, which I'm behind on and I need to catch up on, I started reading some of the DC comics because I wanted to see more Dick Grayson and just looking at different previews on Comixology, and one thing led to another, and I can solidly say I'm a comic fan, or maybe it's more accurate to say I'm a fan of Dick Grayson and the Bat Family. And if you ask me something outside of DC, I have no idea what the answer is, but hopefully that'll change someday. I say hopefully like I don't choose what I read. For anyone listening who might be looking for other podcasts, I'm absolutely in love with Comic Pop and their channel. For different sort of interesting dives, the Comic Drake YouTube channel, I definitely recommend. And for really funny skits and discussions, not like podcasty discussions, but sort of like longer answers, is the Panda Red, who is on TikTok, but who puts his compilations on YouTube. Those are my 3 channels for comic media. So enough of the introduction. I wanted to clap, but I don't really know how much that'll get picked up by the mic, so I'll just make the hand motion. Today I'm going to be talking about the Tales of Exandria, the Bright Queen, which is a 4-issue miniseries. Well, I don't know if it's fair to say it's a miniseries. It's a 4-issue run. And I'll talk about if I think that was the intention or not after the summary and the discussion I wanted to have. But the Tales of Exandria is part of the Critical Role media franchise, and it takes place, I want to say, a couple of decades after Campaign 2. So Critical Role has an official timeline. You can easily Google and look at it if you'd like to know exactly where it is in that timeline. But for the sake of the series, it is a standalone in that it's not contingent upon Campaign 1 or Campaign 2 to pick up. But I will talk later about if I think who the target audience is. The comic does not really explain some of the sort of magic mechanic tropes that are set up in Campaign 2 by Matt. For anyone who doesn't know, Critical Role is the Dungeon Master is Matt Mercer, and he is not the only person who does the world building because they have a whole company and a whole creative team, but he does a lot of he's kind of the head of the creative direction of the campaigns. So I will explain any Matt/Critical Role originated magical concepts that aren't detailed in the comic, but are central to understanding it. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to break down the miniseries issue by issue, and then I have some kind of thoughts, and I'll put those after. So Okay, I'm reading my notes. I took notes, so I'm looking at them. So we're going to be following what's called the Dynasty, which is a group of dark elves that came from the Underdark. And that's what you need to know about the Dynasty, really. Their rival is the Empire. Okay. So issue 1 starts by telling us that they came from the Underdark, and then gods who were still... It's about the creation myth that they have for the Dynasty. And that the gods who were kind of mixing and mingling on Earth, Exandria, which is Earth, they were like, oh, fuck this. We gotta, like, separate ourselves from mankind because the gods were having basically a war and it was fucking everyone over. There was a deity that was called the Luxon, and it created beacons, which were a physical manifestation of that god. Beacon is like, think about a basketball sized D20. That's what a beacon is. It's a basketball sized D20 with handles, and it like glows on the inside. So at the head of the Dynasty is the Bright Queen. Her name is Leylas Kern, Leylas space Krynn, Leylas Kern, and the head of the military of the Dynasty is her lover, Quana, Quana. So Leylas and Quana are wondering if they... Okay, sorry, let me backtrack a little. In the Dynasty, I'll explain this now. In the Dynasty, they're mostly dark elves, so you live about 800 years. Because of the beacons that they got from the deity of the Luxon, they found a magical ceremony that they can do so that if you die within range of the beacon, your soul enters this space and you'll be reincarnated. And once you're reincarnated in your early teenagehood, you'll start getting memories of your past lives. It's called anamnesis. I'm just going to say get your memory back in layman's terms. And people who have gone through the ceremony to be reborn, as long as they die near a Luxon, that's called consecuted. We won't really use this term too much, but just for anyone who's wondering. So Leylas, the Bright Queen, and Quana have been around for a very long time through the different cycles of death and rebirth and reincarnation. So they're wondering if the search for all the beacons have consumed them. This is an interesting note. This is my only note for now. I think I call back to campaign 2 because a major character there, Essek, pointed out that and this is after campaign 2, so I thought it was interesting. Essek points out that the Dynasty does not let wizards and academic study happen of the beacon, and of Dunamis, which is, think of it as sort of like luck manipulation magic that the beacon allows to be channeled because of the deity, the Luxon. Okay. Anyway, I thought it was interesting because Essek 20 years earlier in timeline had been like, hey, maybe we should like study this. And they were like, no. I won't get into it more because that's a lot of character and motivation for Essek in campaign 2. Okay. So Quana and Leylas are talking over the magic D20, over the beacon, and Leylas has a vision that there is a child that is going to be the incarnate of the Luxon that's waiting to be born. We then get what I'm calling the arc series / words in this first issue, which is our love is essential. I did air quotes. We then see, oh my god, I just skipped like a bunch of shit. Wow. Okay, Quana. No, I didn't. Sorry, I thought I did. I read these all fairly fast. There's a dark gnome. His name is Dryca, Dryca. We're not going to really use his name. There's a dark gnome, and he sets up a trap for Quana and her soldiers while she's on sort of an expedition to get a beacon that was farther from the capital in the Dynasty. The trap is a bunch of deities from the lower planes, which in this case is the Underdark, are surfacing into Exandria. This is very bad news. So Leylas was using a scrying mirror, which is the magical equivalent of FaceTiming someone or being on a video call. And she sees Quana get kidnapped by these lower dark entities and goes to rescue Quana, who's her lover. She does not arrive in time. Quana is dragged down into like a dank, dark cave. We don't know what happens. So another theme we get introduced to, and the themes for this are mostly done through different dialogue panels or how comics sort of have the box that's to represent the narration. So we get another theme here, which is love comes at a cost. And we get a quote. This is quoting from the narration box. It's spread across a couple of pages, so I had to like flip back and forth. But the full quote is, light from the absence of creation comes at a cost. So this, I'll talk about all three themes at the end as like a recap. So we get a visual metaphor that juxtaposes onto the narration to... Oh, right. So those are the words in the text box, but it's actually juxtaposed between panels of two characters talking. And so if you go with the visual metaphor or layout of the panel, it's implying that love, to imply substantially about love. Sorry, do you ever write notes and you're like, what did I write? Juxtapose the narration to imply subtextually about love while literally being about creation textually from the narration. Okay, got it. This is why the theming gets a little wild, and it's a whole tangent. I'll do it later. Okay. The text is what I read earlier. Light from the absence of creation comes at a cost. The visual metaphor, though, so those are the words. But on the page, it's talking more about love. That's the dialogue the characters are having, where the narration panels are talking about creation. So at the end of issue 1, we have a theme with variations. So the ARC series words, in my understanding, is, quote, our love is essential. That is a quote I took from the conversation about the Luxon baby. We'll call them the Luxus baby. Then we got theme 2, or variation on theme. Love comes at a cost. We have our quote, light from the absence of creation comes at a cost. So we end issue 1, and our central themes are love and creation and pain of both, question mark, I asked. So that's issue 1. Plot summary of issue 1. We meet Leylas and Quana. They talk about how there's the incarnation of the Luxon waiting to be born. Quana goes to get a beacon, gets kidnapped, and Leylas goes to save her. Okay. Issue 2. I don't think the other issues are going to be as... we won't have problems thinking about the themes like I just did. Issue 2. We find out that the series is a frame narrative, and the POV character, point of view character, is reliving memories from one of their past lives. We then leave the frame narrative and go back into kind of how, just like the normal events, we'll call them. So we find out that everyone died except for the Dark Gnome, who fled. The Dark Gnome says that the Spider Queen is Lolth. She is a lesser deity in Dungeons and Dragons. They can't say Lolth because of copyright, but if you're curious about who this is, Lolth, the Spider Queen, is who they're referring to. We'll use her epithet just because it's what they use in the comics. So, the Dark Gnome says that the Spider Queen was the one who had him set up the trap, and if he didn't set up the trap, she was going to kill everyone. So the Dark Gnome says, I know how to get to the place in the lower planes where, in the Underdark. Well, where Quana is. Sorry, I paused. Okay. The Underdark is a physical place that's just under the surface of the world. Like if you dug deep, you would hit the Underdark. In D&D cosmology, there are different planes of existence. So when they say that she's on a lower plane, they mean that you have to use magic to get from place 1 to place 2. It's not somewhere you can physically stumble into another plane. Okay, that's not true, but for simplicity's sake, you you have to do or use magic to get to another plane. So the Dark Gnome is saying, I know how to get to the plane where Quana was taken, and all the different gods have their own plane where they're kind of, that's their home domain. Okay. So Leylas, the Bright Queen, goes with the Dark Gnome to a place called the Temple of the Betrayer Gods. That is a Critical Role cosmology thing. So when there was the War of the Gods, there were some gods who were like, yeah, we fucking love humanoid creatures, like, humans, elves, blah, blah, blah. Right? All those kind of player races in D&D. And the Betrayer Gods were like, fuck those people. We're here for ourselves, right? So they're sort of like the evil-aligned deities, if you will. Okay. And they go to the Temple of the Betrayer Gods. There is a god called the Storm Lord, and he made a back entrance beyond the veil that keeps the gods separate from the humans, just in case during the War of Gods, which is called the Calamity. There's the Calamity, and then there's the Sundering. We won't get into it. But anyway, the Stormlord made a back entrance just in case things went bad during the war for his mortal champions so that they could, come kick it with him. The Dark Gnome hands over the Stormlord's Heart key item, which is going to allow Leylas to enter what's called the Dread Nest at a yet unknown cost. Unknown to us, but Leylas and the Dark Gnome seem to know. The Dread Nest is the name for the Spider Queen's domain. Okay, so we see a resurgence of the Love is Pain theme. Leylas puts on the pendant. She goes to the Dread Nest. The Luxon range, I noted this, so it must have been important. The range of how far you can die near a beacon is not necessarily only a physical distance. So even though they're in the lower plane and they're next to a beacon, yes, this is what it was. Even though they're physically next to a beacon, if they die right now, because they're in the Dread Nest in the Spider Queen's domain, the Luxon deity doesn't have enough power in that area for the reincarnation of the soul to take place. That's what I wrote it down. I thought that was super interesting, that it's not about your physical proximity to the beacon, more so as the range of the power of the Luxon as a deity. I thought that was interesting. Okay. Okay, so the Spider Queen, Leylas finds Quana, and they start, making a break for it. And, of course, the Spider Queen starts attacking. I want to say it's her or her emissaries. It's a little unclear. I don't remember right now. It's clear in the comic, but it's been, a week or so. So, Leylas is being attacked. She tells Quana to run for it. Quana goes back for Leylas and Quana. Oh, got it. Leylas is like, you are the one who needs to get out, not me. So Leylas gives the magic necklace key item to Quana and says only one person can use it at a time. And it was clear to Leylas when she was talking to the Dark Gnome that was the case. So Leylas gives Quana the key item. Quana and the beacon leave the Dread Nest and go back to Exandria. And Leylas, we see her, implied to be killed. Okay. So we see the prophesized child, who's the incarnation of the Luxon, the deity, in the beacon, and the beacon is our basketball-shaped D20, and we see the child visually like a fetus in the womb. We are now going to call the child that is the incarnation of the deity that is the Luxon, which is very long and in passive voice. We're going to call him, I said him. We're going to call them Dunamis Jesus. Remember, Dunamis is like the RNG magic that the Luxon lets you, following and worshipping the Luxon lets you manipulate. Okay. So, we see Dunamis Jesus in the beacon. And the comic narration at the end of this issue, issue 2, says, "This is only the beginning. Me, it's halfway over, my dude. You only got 4 issues." Okay. Issue 3. So if you're reading... Oh, this is a note on if you are reading Critical Role, if you're reading this comic on the Comixology app, or looking at how it's stored in your Amazon library. So issues 3 and 4 show up as a different series from 1 and 2. So if you've bought issues 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you cannot find them all in the same place, do not panic. You have not lost them. They are cataloged under different series names. So issues 1 and 2 will show up under the series titled Critical Role. 3 and 4 will show up under Critical Role: The Tales of Exandria. Okay. That's our housekeeping note on where to find your comics in the Comixology app. So, we find out that the Laylis who went to the Dreadnought nest was a ruse. The Umavi, U-M-A-V-I, cast a spell... Okay, Umavi are basically you reincarnated... I don't want to say it's like a Buddhist concept of like you reincarnate to like... Maybe Buddhist inspired. I'm not really sure. They don't bring it up in the campaign. That's maybe just me inferring. So basically, Umavi are people who, through the cycle of their rebirth, death, rebirth, and reincarnation, have become what they think is sort of like a perfect soul, someone who's very wise and knowledgeable and very strong. So, and they're typically the heads of their clans in the dynasty, and the dynasty is matriarchal, which is interesting if you're... Okay. I find it super interesting. It's pulling on, I think, how Drow are set up in D&D, based largely, but not wholly, on the series of the Dritz novels by R.A. Salvatore. I can't say for sure that's what Matt was doing or he intended, but I suspect that it was just, dark elves in D&D tend to be matriarchal. I'm not going to rock the boat and change that. We're going to keep it. Anyway, I think it's super interesting. You could get me on a whole diatribe about the R.A. Salvatore novels, though I've only read 3 of them for research for the Underdark campaign that I run with some friends. But anyway, back to Critical Role. So, we find out that the Laylis who was in the... This was super confusing, by the way, when I first read it, okay? Because I got confused, and I'll tell you why. So, we find out that the Laylis who was in the Dreadnest was a souped-up version of a spell called Manifest Echo, which creates a body double. This was not clear to me when I was reading issues 1 to 4. Maybe that's because I was still learning how to read comics well. Maybe that's because there was a month between each of these being released. I'm going to say that was my bad and not the comics. But, so I've read this series 3 times. I've read it once when it came out. Then I read it a second time when issue 4 came out because I was just confused. And I was trying to, understand more. And then I read it a third time to get the notes that we're using for today's recording. So I need you to know, I understand this a lot more than I did the first time that I read it. Okay, so we find out that Laylis isn't dead and it was a body double who got killed on the Dreadnest. So Quana and Laylis have reunion and life-affirming sex next to the beacon. Okay, So Quanah is now pregnant with Lux and Jesus. Lux and Jesus, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so the Quanah now being pregnant with Lux and Jesus fulfills a prophecy, and it's being used as a reunification message to far out regions of the dynasty. And so Laylis / kind of the dynasty decide that this is the time to spread the reach of the dynasty. So they point out that the Empire is still something to watch out for. I put a note that this comic series is the furthest in the Critical Role timeline, and I was wondering, is the Empire still like a political and martial threat to the dynasty like it was during Campaign 2? Or is it more that the dynasty, who is combined with living a long time because they're dark elves and then being reincarnated, are they just stuck in the past? And I put a note here that the official CR timeline, CR Critical Role, puts this 20 years after Campaign 2. So Quanah confronts Laylis Quanah confronts Laylis that Laylis has been having nightmares about what happened in the Dread Nest. Laylis denies this, but when you look at the art, you can her how she's portrayed shows, to me at least, that she's clearly lying to Quanah about not having nightmares. So we don't find out. When I say we find out, I mean it's, we're reading the comic and it's shown on page. So Laylis sometimes hallucinates the people around her as the Spider Queen taunting her. Lux and Jesus is born. Laylis continues dynasty expansionism. She doesn't go back home to Quanah and Lux and Jesus. We don't know the name right now of Lux and Jesus. She continues the expansion. I'm going to have a sip of water. Thank you. Okay. So the Luxon, which is a deity, has reached out to certain groups of people, and those groups of people have accepted sort of the dynasty expansion. But Laylis wants to push further for strategic purposes. She wants to go to closer to the coast, the Menagerie coast. Okay, we have another theme. Or I wrote note in another color to... Okay, anyway. My notes are in a different color when it's about the theme. So, in issue 1, we said light without creation comes at a cost. I don't know if I said it. The Luxon, or maybe it's inferred. Maybe you guys figured it out. The Luxon is a light... like literally like light as a deity. So light is not necessarily just a kind of word. When they say light without creation, it can also be referring to the Luxon and the spread of the Luxon. Okay. So light without creation comes at a cost. I was wondering if this is getting brought up because she's expanding light without creating something more. Laylis, and then we see... I wrote, Laylis's continued haunting. Oh, I put what without creation comes at a cost. So I said, what was the cost, right? Because she's spreading the Luxon's... She's like, I don't want to say proselytizing. I mean, like... there is a threat. The dynasty's a military force. So I said, what's the cost, right? And it would be Laylis's continued hauntings. The dynasty expansion is coming from the fear of not agreeing instead of acceptance of the beacon. So we see panels of people being sort of, we'll say, I don't want to say converted, but agreeing with Laylis, but they're not doing it because they want to. You can see that they're afraid. Laylis goes to the Menagerie coast. They do not accept the outreach. One man speaks up and he says that the the child is cursed and was made by corrupted dunamancy, RNG magic. This is foreshadowing. Leylis has a hallucination of the Spider Queen when this guy is lashing out at her, and she beheads them. The guy who she beheads had also said that this is just expansionism, which I noted in this case is true because we saw it a couple panels ago, but your mileage might vary if that's true for the entire time she's been gone, or if it's just a partial reason. Something else I noted is your mileage may vary was Leylis only snapping because of all the hallucinations? Was she triggered at the moment because she was being called a false queen, something that she's often taunted by the Spider Queen in her hallucinations? Was it a hallucination or was it not? I put yes. So I put your mileage may vary because it's not clear if it's a hallucination or if it's sort of a PTSD reaction. Sorry about the pause there. The first times I read it, I was like, it's a hallucination. But when I was giving it for the reread, I was like, I don't know if it's meant to be clear cut. Okay. Leylis says she feels like a part of her never left the dread nest. We hop back over to the frame narrative. Leylis wants to see the POV character and the memory guide. When you start getting your memories in your late childhood, early teenage years, it's very confusing. So there's someone, and it's their job to help people get through the memory recall process to help them go through that. They have a title. I don't even know it off the top of my head. We're just going to call them the memory guide. So Leylis wants to see the POV character and the memory guide. The memory guide says, fuck off, and you got to wait your turn. Okay, we leave the frame narrative and go back to the main events, which, again, is a flashback. Okay. Leylis returns from the mission she was on, but she won't see Lex and Jesus and this is causing strain in her relationship with Quana. I noted we see a reappearance of the Love is Pain theme and the Creation is Pain theme. And I noted that we see creation and pain for Leylis, but not for Quana, because as we've been going through these chapters, we really see that Quana loves the child. We find out that the child's name is Calestis, Caelestis. So Calestis, Lex and baby Jesus will now call by their name, Calestis. So Calestis' existence is tearing them apart, Lisa. Okay, I still need to see the room. One day we'll see the room. But anyway, Calestis is one day playing and follows a mote of light. So just like a little, like a golf ball floaty light, right? And as they're doing that, they are teleported, they walk through like a portal and it looks like it, and they're teleported to the beacon holding room. Leylis sees the dynasty's future. She's a mage of some sort. She sees the dynasty's future and, quote, a presence she could not yet explain, end quote. We then go back and we see, so that narration, I'll tell you what we see, and the narration over it is Layla saying, a presence she could not yet explain. And then we see Calestis covered in blood and guards' bodies lying around on the edges of the panel. That's how issue 3 ends. We are now on the final issue, The Bright Queen, issue 4. So there's a conflict. Leylis sees Calestis as a killer. Quana sees her beloved and locked up child. Laylis says that the beacon that they recovered from the Dread Nest was gone for too long and it must have been corrupted. Laylis also says that the expansion has created fighting between the new groups that have joined the dynasty. We get a gender on Calestis. Calestis is said to be a girl. Laylis posits... Oh, I shouldn't laugh. Sorry, I laughed because I used the word posits. Okay, so Laylis posits that when Quana she basically says, Quana, do you know that the kid is ours? And says, what if we don't know what happened when you were in the Dread Nest? What if you were raped and impregnated by the Spider Queen? Sorry, I need to put a timestamp on this. Okay, 35 seconds. Okay, I'll put a note in the description and I'll make a chapter. Okay, 35. I should have put it before, but okay. Okay, so Layla says, I think the Spider Queen raped and impregnated you while you were in the Dread Nest. She doesn't say it that clearly. I'm summing it up. Quana refutes this and says that Cal Estes is their child. I'm going to, in the end, talk about what I think about this reveal after the summary. So, Layla sends Quana... That's all about sexual assault right now. Layla sends Quana and the guards outside of the beacon's range to kill Cal Estes. Why didn't Laylis, who doesn't care, kill the child and have Quana do it? Is a question you might have, and I do, and we'll talk about it after the summary. We're almost done with the summary. So, when Quana and Co. go outside of the range of the beacon, and Quana asks to be left alone to kill Cal Estes, and they go behind a waterfall, and Quana had busted out the Dark Gnome guy who was the traitor in issue 1. And says, take Cal Estes away from here to safety. Cal Estes starts panicking because, this is terrifying because she's a child. And Quana is, basically the only person who's ever loved her. So she panics. And in her panic, she gets, a half spider form. It's terrifying, as I don't like spiders. But very sad. It's a lower spider half, mostly. So she panics, and the half spider form manifests from her, and she kills the Dark Gnome. The guards start attacking, and Cal Estes begs Quana to, save her. And Quana is heartbroken while this is happening. This was actually very hard to read. It crossed past my fear of spiders, first off, but second off, because, it's the juxtaposition of Cal Estes as, manifesting as a monster while crying for her mother to help her. It's, I felt something. Okay, so Cal Estes is killing all the guards. So Quana kills Cal Estes, but she's left with a grievous wound, and she is beyond the beacon's range. We see again the Levis pain theme. Quana wouldn't have been in this situation if not for her love of her daughter. I noted, would it be possible for Quana to not love her daughter? Because one of the arc words we had in the first issue is love is essential. But what kind? We'll circle back. Just know, love is essential. I have thoughts about what does that mean. Okay. We jump back to the frame narrative. So we find out that both Cal Estes and Quana died beyond the beacon's reach. So I can't be either of them. The memory guide points out that the stream where Cal Estes dies flows towards a beacon. And so the POV character is like, oh, fuck, I'm the reincarnation of Cal Estes. I am the reincarnation of the corrupted RNG magic that is, I am, a manifestation of the Spider Queen. Okay. So the POV character leaves without any further explanation from the memory guide, and they head to the waterfall where it all happened. Laylis appears, so now we're in the present. No more flashbacks. We're in the present now. Laylis confronts the frame narrative character at the waterfall, and the frame narrative character asks, "Are you here to kill me?" And we get a couple of, I want to say pages, not panels. I think we get a couple pages that say people are like the Luxon and that they are searching for light, parentheses, light and love. I put that the visual metaphor used is unclear. It's the one used for souls, but the narration is about the Luxon myth. So I think it's trying to tie those together. The Luxon is looking for light. Souls are looking for love. I think that's what it's doing. Okay. I put switchy arrows, so I wanted to see. So we get one more flashback to Laylis frantically going to the waterfall where Quana is injured and Cal Estes lies dead, and returning a dying Quana back to the capital so that she dies within reach of the beacon. And Laylis tells the frame character that I've known you were Quana since you were born. I put you since you were born in the color for theming about love. Okay. Then we find out, so then we go to the gates and Laylis is there with a company of guards ready to leave the city. And then we see reincarnated Quana, who's, I don't want to say prepubescent, but is definitely in that like 12 to 16 range, right? Is like clearly still a child, in armor, goes to the head of the expedition with Laylis before they leave. And they infer, it wasn't clear to me the first time I read it, or the second time I read it. No, it wasn't clear to me the first time. It confused me the first time, was clear the second time. That Cal Estes didn't die. She floated down the river and is still growing. They've had reports from parts of the dynasty that larger and larger creatures have been killed and eaten. So Laylis says that there's much to do. So on Laylis's to-do list is restore the beacons, fix the alliances that they made during the dynasty expansion, and to save Cal Estes from the Spider Queen. Quana understands the purpose of existence, but they don't tell us what it is. I put ends frame narrative with word essence. Only after... Oh, okay. I was like, what were my notes trying to like convey here? One sec. I'm sitting in a rolly chair, so I had to readjust. So in the frame narrative, they end using the word essence, which is a callback because the only other time essence was used in the whole run was in issue 1 when they were talking about love. So inferring that the purpose of existence that Quana found is the theme. The purpose of it all / the essence of life is love. A lot to take in, isn't it? So that is all 4 issues. If I had to explain it in the simplest of terms, what happened is, oh God, I was like, cut out the fluff, cut out the fluff. Someone is getting their memories of their past life. The memories follow Laylis, the Bright Queen, and her lover, Quana. Quana is captured. She returns. She and Laylis have a child. While the child is in the womb, Laylis goes on Dynasty Expansion. She comes back. The child she has with Quana murders some guards, and we find out that the Spider Queen has influence on the child. Laylis then says that the child, that Quana was raped and impregnated, and that the child is the Spider Queen's. Quana refutes this, saying that the child is their child. Layla says the child must be killed. Quana goes, tries to save the child, fails. The child gets taken over by the Spider Queen, goes on a rampage. Quana and Cal Estes, the child, both die outside the reach of the beacon. We then find out that Layla had come, saved Quana, as in brought her into range of the beacon. Cal Estes, who we believe dead, is not dead and is still out there. And now that it's been a while and Quana has gained her memories of her previous lives, she and Layla are going to right all the mistakes that have been made in this 4 issues, being expansion, saving the child, and fixing the corruption of the beacon that was in the presence of the Spider Queen. Whew! There we go. That's the summary of the 4 issues. Okay. Here are my thoughts. What is the theme of the 4 issues? So I put there are too many themes and it muddles the intended meaning. I don't know what the central theme is of the 4 issues. Is the central theme love? Is it creation? Is it love is pain? Is it love is essential? Is it light is love? Is it light without creation causes pain? I then went on like a diatribe about the last one, if light without creation causes pain. So I went on a diatribe in my notes about this, is if light equals love, then that would mean that love without creations causes pain. And I picked up, that's fucked up to saying like, if you love someone but you don't like create progeny, it causes pain. So I don't think that is the message, because 1, it's fucked up, and 2, I just don't think that's like consistent with what I know about the cast and like the kind of things it's just not consistent with, it just wouldn't make sense for CR, I guess. And I also put that it is directly contradicted with Laylis, because if the theme is life without creation causes pain, that would mean that love with creation doesn't have pain, and Laylis is clearly in pain because of Cal Estes' existence. I put that light equals love is thematically correct, like visually, and with the creation myth, but it would contradict the narrative. Okay. You might wonder, what would I pick as the central theme? As, you know, we all wonder. I would say that love is essential is the central theme of the 4-issue series, is that love is essential. I put, if you needed a secondary theme or wanted to expand the theme, I would do that love can cause pain. Yes. Okay. I have a lot of confusion about the conception of Cal Estes. I actually went on a rant with a friend. He came over to my house and he was graciously cooking for us. And the issue with the sex I had read it recently. And I told him I was confused because I did not understand how Lex and Jesus came to be. Because, okay, so here's why. Okay. I'm like, I don't want to get into a whole thing of gender. The Bright Queen is referred to as female. Quana is referred to as female. I obviously, like, Layla, like, there's all sorts of reasons why, like, Laylis can have the equipment to bear children with Quana. Sorry, I'm pausing. I'm like, my friends are going to be listening to this and they know that I'm like not transphobic, but like, okay. But so I was just confused because like, I thought that my confusion going forward that I had on my first and second read was, did they conceive Cal Estes biologically or magically? Because the visuals are unclear. So I thought that it was a sort of immaculate conception. It was either like Laylis and Quanah both just have the equipment to where they can make kids. I thought it was that and / or immaculate conception. It left me confused, but I wasn't so hung up on it. I was like, it can't happen because it's a comic book. It's a fantasy comic book. But I am saying that it's confusing. So I'm going to get into a discussion about the conception. I'm going to put a timestamp, so 50 seconds. We're going to get into Layla saying, Quanah, I think you were assaulted by the Spider Queen. So I'll put the timestamp. Here we go. So the conception, okay. So the conception, when Laylis brings up Calestis' conception, it felt like the use of rape as a plot device. That is a huge subject. It is an incredibly complex and complicated and nuanced discussion. I don't really want to, and I'm not going to get into how I feel about that trope being used, and my thoughts on that trope, but I'm going to tell you it is usage of the trope of rape being used as a plot device, which, like I said, deserves its own discussion because it's a very complex, nuanced, and like, if you're going to, I don't want to go into it more because I feel like it deserves the respect of, if you're going to discuss it, to really discuss it. Okay. So aside from the trope is used. The use of the trope weakened I felt was unnecessary. I don't want to say gratuitous, but I feel like it was unnecessary. We had already seen visuals and text narration that were leaning towards the child being immaculate conception. And I don't understand why they didn't just stick with that. Or with just being like, look, like, it doesn't really matter. Laylis and Quanah both have the parts to have a kid. So I felt that it was unnecessary to use the trope of rape as a plot device. I also said, why would you not... Sorry, I didn't write this. I just thought of it. So it's not to say that forced impregnation is not also bad. Why did I do that all in negatives? I do understand that doing an immaculate conception with Quanah by the Spider Queen would still be bad because forced impregnation by someone is still traumatic, even if it's magical and it's not being, forced impregnation by someone else, no matter how that forced impregnation happens, is traumatic. I understand that. On the scale, I don't understand in this context of a fantasy comic why it went with Quanah was raped and forcibly impregnated, because I totally had assumed on my first read and would have believed that the Spider Queen had used magic to corrupt the beacon, or just done some magic mumbo jumbo to make Quanah pregnant. So I do not like the Spider Queen Quanah choice. I understand it's not something you're supposed to like either, but it just seems odd to me that they went with the rape and forced impregnation of a character when they could have totally just gone with the beacon was in the Spider Queen's possession, and while the Spider Queen had it, she tampered with it, and when Laylis and Quana had their life-affirming sex near the beacon, that the corrupted essence went into the child. You see what I'm saying? Like, they could have just not had any sort of sexual violence, and they chose to have it. I think that's what's odd to me is, and yeah, it's like, please, anyone who, you know, knows me in real life, if I'm unclear about this, just let me know. Obviously, I don't think any of this should happen in real life, ever. So it just seems weird to me that in this comic, where they could have easily not had, like, a violation of a character, they chose to have one. And it's just odd to me that no one else on the team, I mean, it's a whole, you know, writing team, art team, I'm sure other people at the company read it, I'm sure, like, the publishing house read it, that no one else kind of, like, thought it was weird and that they decided to include it. Okay, so I'll end the timestamp. I do go back and listen to these. I'll end the timestamp for discussion of, you know, sexual violence. Okay, so Quana was the one who took Cal Estes to be killed, and Quana did that so she could smuggle away Cal Estes. But it makes no sense for Laylis to agree to letting Quana take Cal Estes in the first place, because for Laylis to agree, because Quana so much loves Cal Estes, is absolutely over the moon, loves Cal Estes. So for Laylis not to get suspicious when Quana insists on it, made me think a couple of different things. Either, sorry, one sec, I opened sticky notes and it opened in a weird way and took up half my screens. So that means either this Laylis is just dumb. She just didn't think about Quana being sketch. 2, she's just being needlessly cruel to Quana to say, I know you absolutely love our child, or, well, Laylis doesn't think it's our child. You absolutely love this child. Yeah, you're gonna kill her. Or she trusts Quana, her ultimate love, more than anything, which I noted is thematically inconsistent. There's nothing that we saw in the 4 issues that made it seem like Laylis loves Quana, but Laylis doesn't trust her. That's not something we had seen. So that option to me seemed thematically inconsistent. I read it as combination she didn't think about it / needlessly cruel. Well, that's the first 2 reads, I didn't think anything of it. And then the 3rd read, I was like, why didn't you just kill Cal Estes? You don't like Cal Estes. Okay. We have the theme that love is essential, and it made me wonder what kind of love it was referring to, whether it was romantic love or familial love. So, at the end of the 4-issue run, Quana's implication is that romantic love is essential. And I thought this was weird because more than the romantic love that Quana and Laylis had, I felt like the driving force of the comic was Quana's love for Cal Estes. So Quana and Laylis' relationship is completely overshadowed by Cal Estes' story arc. And so to me, the love is essential theme reads stronger if it's the familial, like, love, or like love between, like, parent and child, than the romantic love between Laylis and Quana. So did I put how long was this supposed to be? Sorry. Okay. So comic is 4 issues. I don't know, and I've looked for reviews of this miniseries. I've looked for criticism. I've looked for anything. I have seen maybe 1 paragraph blurb in a, This Week in Comics about The Bright Queen issue 4. I can't find anyone talking about this. So I don't know how long the series was supposed to be. I suspect it was not going to be 4 issues, just because my understanding of comics is that usually you want to go 6, if you're going to not do like a whole year, that usually a trade paperback is 6 issues. So this is only 4, and I'm sure, like, I'm no expert, like, I'm sure maybe a 4-issue trade is not like super rare, maybe just uncommon. I also don't think it was meant to be 4 issues, because if it was, the CR would have told us, right? They would have said, hey, we're doing this miniseries. We're going to be doing this miniseries. It's going to be this many issues. So they could create hype. And I also don't think that it was meant to be 4 issues, because I would assume they would have it out there, right? That it's issue 1 of 4. And maybe they would do the thing that DC does, where on a limited run in the corner, it says issue 1 of X. So I don't think that it was intended to be this short. Based on the fact I can find literally no one talking about this, it was probably like a sales issue, right? Like, we're making this comic, no one is reading it, it's a waste of, resources, just cut it. So when you're reading the comic and you're reading issues 1 through 4, it feels like the frame narrative character is going to be Cal Estes, that it's not going to be Quanah. And I do think that the frame character being Quanah's reincarnation is a result of the shortened time that they had with the series. And I think that the series is weaker for Quanah being for it being Quanah's reincarnation, because the narrative focuses on Cal Estes' conception and her quote-unquote death. So that means that Cal Estes is either the central conflict or focus, and Laylis and Quanah are primary characters, or it means that Cal Estes is the primary character with Laylis and Quanah as supporting characters. So because so much time is spent on Cal Estes, it doesn't make sense for me, and it doesn't satisfy me as a reader for it to be like, oh, yeah, this is Quanah. Because it's just like, what? Like, we've been, like, and maybe for some people it's like, oh, of course it's Quanah, because in the frame narrative, we see things from before Cal Estes was born. To which I'm like, it's a fucking comic, right? Like, it's got to lay the scene for us. So I was just like, yeah, it's like memories about Cal Estes coming into the world. It didn't, to me, that didn't read as like, oh, it must be Quanah. It was like, okay, like, it's setting the scene for us to understand Cal Estes is reincarnation. For the reincarnation of Cal Estes to understand her memories and where she came from. Okay. So with the reincarnation, having Quanah be having it be the reincarnation of Quanah sort of creates like this nice, neat little bow on like, oh, like everything is answered. Like, we're just gonna solve the problems that you only learned were problems in this 4-issue series, where Cal Estes leaves more things to explore. And, like, what does that mean? Like, that's just so much more interesting to me if it was the reincarnation of Cal Estes than if it was the reincarnation of Quanah. And I did note here, I think it was a decision because the run was just cut short. I really do. I've got 2 more notes I put here. So Calestis is not killed at the end of the flashbacks. Calestis is injured in the river and floats throughout the dynasty and lives. Which means that in that time, Quana died, was reincarnated, and is somewhere between like 12 and 16. I'm going by the art. I just don't want to pull up the age. You know, for you, dear listeners, let's see if we can find the age on the CR wiki. Imavi, yep. Do you want to say the age? Nope. Yeah, so we'll say they're, anywhere from like 12 to 16 based on how they're drawn. I think the Wildmount Adventurer's Guide says, but I do not care enough to go look there. So, my question being, what was the Bright Queen doing for at least a decade? Like, all these problems are happening, and she's like, oh, reincarnated Quana, we gotta go solve these problems with Calestis and the Dynasty and the Beacon. What the hell has Laius been doing for 10 years? She's just been sitting on her ass. Because the way it's framed doesn't make me believe that it's different than when the flashback ended. It seems like things are in the same state as they were. So it's like, what has Laius fucking been doing for 10 years? And why is she not solving these problems, and she needed to wait for the reincarnation of her lover to do it. Mind you, just because her reincarnated lover has the memories of her past lives, she is still physically like a 12 to 16 year old. So she's like, I don't care how much knowledge you have, she wasn't raised as like a fighter or like a super soldier or something, right? Like, there's no way that like she's in peak physical condition to go on these expansions. Okay. My last note about, other than what the hell have you been doing, Laius, is how does consent work in the Dynasty? Is it based on your age total? So I put, how does the Dynasty and consent ages work? With consecration, which is the rebirth, and past life experiences versus the current life power imbalances. I think it's something maybe we might never see get brought up in CR, just because it seems like it's such a messy question. And I know if I was a public figure, I wouldn't want to get into the weeds about like, how does age of consent work with rebirth? But I do think that, like, the comic just brushes over it. Like, Quana gets her memories back, and then she's like, oh, yeah, like, Laius, the queen, mind you, who's, yeah, like, the love of my lives. But, like, that, I don't know. Like, it just doesn't, I just have questions about that. Like, how does that work on like a society level? That's what I want to know. It's just like, what does that mean for the Dynasty? Like, yeah, I thought it was just like treated like, oh yeah, like I've got my memories back. So like, Quana, you're my lover. But yeah, I don't want to say it's weird, but like, I just don't know. I guess I didn't put the note about target audience in here, though I thought it a lot. I think, or maybe I didn't put it in here because it was sort of obvious compared to the Origin comics, which I will be recording and putting an episode of. The target audience for this series is definitely fans of Critical Role, Campaign 2. This series isn't going to appeal to someone just off the street. It might visually, like, I'm not saying, right? But it's not intended. The target audience is people who like Critical Role, people who know the lore, because it does not set anything up. It doesn't tell you about the Luxon, it doesn't tell you about the Beacons, it doesn't tell you what Dunamis is, it doesn't tell you who Laius is, it doesn't tell you who Quana is. It doesn't explain any of these things to the viewer, and I don't think because it's not meant to be sort of anyone can pick it up friendly, I think that's okay. Maybe because it can't reach a broad audience and fans didn't pick it up, that probably is why it got canceled, because It just didn't have any potential to lure new readers in. The myth of the new reader. It didn't have anything. It wasn't accessible enough to non-CR fans to pick up, but it wasn't interesting to fans of CR. I would say it's hard because I was just so confused the first couple times I read it. And I have very good reading comprehension. So, like, not to say I must understand everything. I'm not so full of hubris. And like I admitted earlier, a lot of this is I'm still new to reading comics myself and sort of the visual and different genre conventions that they use. So I did enjoy doing an analysis of it. I really liked the reading when I was taking notes and thinking about the theming. But when I was sort of just doing like a normal read, I was not a huge fan. So I would say if you listen to this and you were super interested, the trade paperback is going to come out later this year. And otherwise, I would honestly give it a pass, or if your friend has it or your library has it or however you're going to consume your comics has it and it's piqued your interest, it is worth a read. If not for the story, the art, I didn't mention it, I'm so sorry. The art is absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. Not stunning as in it's like the most beautiful art I've ever seen in my life, or even in the Critical Role comics themselves. But I think the art was very well done, incredibly well done. And yeah, it's not to where I would say pick it up for the art alone, like I would with like Dark Knights of Steel. But it was really good art. Of course, that comparison is like apples and oranges just because the amount of scale on Dark Horse versus DC. But anyway, so those are my thoughts. Pick up, if you were like, yeah, that sounds interesting, pick up the trade paperback when it comes out later this year. If it didn't pique your interest, you're not missing out on anything kind of critical. So that's my thoughts on the Bright Queen 4-issue miniseries. And I will be recording an episode. It might be 1 or 2, but I suspect it'll be 1 episode talking about the Caleb origin comic that came out and the Jester origin comic that came out. I have the notes ready for both of them already. I just have to sit down and get them recording. All right. I hope you enjoyed and catch you next time.